Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for Career Transition Coaching, how tapping into motivation can be the key to a successful transition. We are so excited to have you with us here today. My name is Lucy Sullivan from MRG, and I'll be your host for today. And before we begin, I'll just cover a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording today's webinar. So you will get a link to the recording, a link to these slides. You'll get that shortly after the webinar. And then in a few days, we'll also send a blog post that has a summary of all the key points that we covered. And it'll also have the Q&A with our experts. So speaking of the Q&A, due to, of course, the size of our audience today, everyone is muted and your cameras are off, but we absolutely want to hear from you during this. We're very eager to get your questions. So you've all probably spent plenty of time on Zoom, but in case you haven't, that Q&A is right there at the bottom. So you just navigate toward that and pop your questions in there. You don't need to wait for a Q&A break to do that. You're welcome to put them in at any time. And we will break a couple times during the presentation to answer those. And any that we don't get to during the broadcast today, or that we want to spend a little more time with, we can get to those offline. And we'll also, as I mentioned, we'll put a Q&A in the blog so that everybody can read those. And please don't hesitate. Again, we have some really terrific expertise with us here today. So please don't hesitate to get a little of their knowledge. So speaking of our experts, I'll tell you who MRG is and who we have with us today. So MRG is a global leader in designing assessments that impact people in profound and meaningful ways. We have solutions for leadership, motivation, personal development, sales, service. They're insightful, they're research-backed instruments, and they have action-inspiring feedback, and they're designed to foster a very deep self-awareness and encourage people to pursue real growth. And that's a lot of what you'll hear about today. So MRG was founded nearly 40 years ago, and our assessments have been used by thousands of certified practitioners in over 100 countries around the globe. Many of you are here with us today, and welcome. And our two presenters that we have today, we'll have Drew Rand and David Ringwood. So Drew's based out of our Portland, Maine headquarters. He's been with MRG as an IO psychologist for just a few years now, and in that time has made a very big impact. He has a breadth of experience in consulting, developing leadership programs, coaching, and working with leaders around the world. And he also plays a very important role in designing and developing and refining our assessments here at MRG. And David is based in our Dublin, Ireland office, and he's been with MRG since way back in 2006. He's our VP of client development for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And David also has a very extensive consulting background, and he really works with clients in all aspects of the business, teaching certifications, consulting, product development, supporting practitioners really with any way they use the assessments. And he has a great passion for assessment and how it can be used to support people in their professional development and in their life journeys. And both of these gentlemen have just so much experience and expertise in the motivation area of our business. So I look forward to hearing what they have to say today. And please don't hesitate to ask questions and pick their brains. So I will leave it to you guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction. It is a pleasure to be with you all this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world. It's nice to see some familiar names on the attendance list today, but also great to see some names that I don't recognize, which is fantastic as well. I think David and I have some great content to bring you here over the next 60 minutes or so about coaching for career transitions. It's really bucketed into three primary, I'll call it categories here today. First things first, I'm going to be talking just about career transitions themselves and really why they are a critical point in a person's really personal and professional journey. I'm also going to be talking about the developmental focus of a career transition and really what a career transition allows for in terms of the developmental side of things and really why it allows for a chance to increase self-awareness and hopefully evolve. And then David's going to be bringing us home here today in terms of really assessing the opportunities. So if somebody is out there looking for a new career, a new position, how do they go about doing it? How do they assess the opportunities and how do they evaluate and approach each opportunity to hopefully make a better decision for themselves? So career transitions, why are they important? Why are they such a critical point in a person's professional and really personal journey? And I want to start today with a poll because as I was putting together my content for today, I really realized that in all of my work that I do in terms of my coaching and my feedback delivery, that whether or not the engagement was really centered around career transition, I often end up there anyways. The conversation often ends up there anyways. And so I was curious, is it just me or does it happen to a lot of folks? So in terms of this poll, within your coaching and within your feedback engagements, I'm just curious, how often is career transition discussed? Whether it was the intent of the engagement or not. So I'll just turn it over to Lucy here for a second to run the poll, and we'll see what people say here.
Great. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everyone, for participating. We'll give it just another moment, but everybody's right on it. And we'll share those results in just a second. Let's see. All right. So often came through the most at 30%, and another 29% said almost always. We have just 12% at rarely and 28% at sometimes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lucy. So this is what I thought. In fact, I thought it was actually going to be a little bit more. I thought that they almost always in the often were going to be even maybe above that 70% mark, but still at 60%. I think that it really solidifies the fact that this is a really important topic to be covering. But even that aside, I just wanted to pull in a couple pieces of data just to really, I would say, dig a little deeper into the fact that this is really an important, I would say, aspect in a person's life, and the fact that it actually happens a lot. So I think we all can agree that we are in a unique moment in time in sort of the global circumstance in terms of the pandemic. And so I've got a couple pieces of information, a couple pieces of data there, but also just talking about it outside of that. So a survey or a research that was done a couple of months ago, end of 2020, found that 64% of Americans are looking for new opportunities. And so that's over 2/3 or almost 2/3 of the working population here in the U.S. is potentially looking for new opportunities, which is just an enormous number. And then even outside of that, another study that was done earlier last year in July of 2020 found that 80% of company leaders plan to permit remote work even after the pandemic. So I think, when you take, what you folks said in the poll, what we have here in terms of these two pieces of data, it really talks about the fact that I think we are in a, to use the word itself, a transitionary time in terms of what people are thinking about in terms of their careers, and the fact that I think there's a lot of opportunity open to people that might not have been available to them in the past. When you think about this number right here, geographic, limiting stuff might not be as relevant anymore. And in the opportunities that might be available to people might be expanding, and therefore career transition may be more relevant now than maybe it's ever been. But even outside of the pandemic, and even outside of where we are right now, a piece of data that was collected a few years ago in 2018 found that 51% of people change jobs every 1 to 5 years, right? So even outside of our current circumstance, you've got half of the people in the workforce who are changing jobs very, very often. So I think, again, between the poll and these pieces of data, it really solidifies the fact that what we're talking about here today is quite relevant. What can we infer from these studies, though, right? What can we infer from this data in your poll? And I think what we can infer is a couple of things. The first is people are changing jobs a lot, right? And maybe to the point where, they're doing it without enough thought, right? And without thinking about it enough. And so you jump into a new opportunity without enough reflection, without thinking about it enough. Within a very short period of time, potentially, the new job doesn't feel right. And then what do you start doing? You start searching for a new job because that's what you do, right? And then you have a creative urgency, you get a sense of urgency because the new job isn't feeling great, and then you jump into a new opportunity potentially without much reflection. So what happens here? I think it's really a vicious cycle that leads to missed opportunity in terms of a couple of things. The first is it leads to a missed opportunity in terms of thinking about what does this moment allow for, right? What does this moment allow for in terms of understanding a little bit more about yourself, a little bit about what you may need or may not need. And it also leads to a missed opportunity in terms of just making a better decision for yourself, right? Just making a better decision, and one that will hopefully allow for a little bit more clarity, and hopefully a decision that might stick, right? So how can we use these moments for more than just a job change, right? More than, well, I guess I got to find a new job. How can we recognize that career transitions really offer an opportunity for reflection, right? They offer an opportunity to increase our self-awareness about what we find fulfilling, and hopefully allow us to evolve a little bit. How can we recognize that this really is a developmental opportunity? So what can they offer? So, in terms of that career transition, if really approached, I think, with a degree of deliberateness, and maybe not quite the same sense of sort of intense urgency that I just referenced, what does it potentially offer the opportunity for? First of all, focus development, right? Recognizing and accepting that this is an opportunity for development, that this is an opportunity to pause, reflect, and think about how things have evolved to where they are today. Secondly, a fresh start, right? A chance to rebrand, a chance to reflect, a chance to think about the developmental journey. And I think what people will find here is if they do this, right, this is an opportunity not to make a decision that will reinforce bad habits, not to make the decision that they've always made, and really an opportunity to potentially break the pattern or the patterns, behavior or decisions that haven't worked well in the past. And then finally, alignment, right? It's an opportunity to make a fundamentally better decision, to make a decision that will allow for better alignment between what a person finds truly rewarding, and hopefully lead to a decision that will stick. So the way that I would like to, or the way that Dave and I think are going to approach the rest of the content here today is just talking about career transitions and three things not to do, not to miss within career transitions, and hence three things to really focus on. So not to overlook these three really important things. So what are they? First things first. Don't ignore past experience, right? I'm going to talk more about it here in a second, but just don't ignore past experience. Secondly, don't overlook the role of motivation and the role that it's played again to where you are right now, but also the influence it's going to have in your future decisions. And then finally, David will chat about, really recognizing and ensuring that you don't fail to recognize and examine all the unique facets of our career and assessing those opportunities to hopefully lead to that better decision. So let's talk about reflecting on the past, right? So don't ignore past experience. So just three tips when we're thinking about reflection. I think the first thing that I want to say here is, don't get stuck in the present and the future, right? People are often far too focused on the future, what they want, what they need. And these aren't necessarily bad questions, but it's almost like putting the cart before the horse, right? You can't answer those questions accurately or really with any sort of depth without reflecting on past experience and being deliberate in terms of that past experience. Second thing I want to say here is really what people are focused on when they make decisions. What people are, when they're thinking about past experience, what they sort of think about. People are always focused on what they get with a decision. What am I getting when I say yes to this? If I make this decision, this is what I'm getting. What people far less likely think about is what they lose, right? When you make a choice for something, you're also making a choice against something else. And people don't think about this, but it's critical in these moments, not only to think about potentially the future, right, but also the past. When you made a decision for this, what were you saying no to, and how did it go, right? So think about it in that way. Nothing's perfect, right? There are pros and cons with every decision, and people really need to carefully evaluate what they are saying no to when they're saying yes to something else, or what they said no to when they said yes to something else in the past, and allow that reflection to sort of seep into their thinking, and hopefully create some awareness. Last thing I want to say here is just make sure people aren't overreacting to current circumstance, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Well, in career change, this isn't always appropriate, right? It really can lead to a poor choice. Do they even need a career change, right? Or are they just reacting to the fact that the last month has been so terrible, right? And I got to get out. Well, was it really terrible before that? Or, are you just reacting to it right now? To make this really relevant, I was in terms of where we are right now and people, potentially overreacting to today's current circumstance. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago about how people a lot of people have purchased homes in the past year, and they are now realizing, I don't want to be here. I don't like this home. I don't like that we've moved here. So really overreacted to that current circumstance, went through the decision quickly without enough reflection, and now here we are. And I made a really big decision, financial, geographic, and I've got to rewind it a little bit. Secondly, here, find the moments that really worked and really didn't, right? Within this area of reflection, I like to ask people to think about the moments in their lives, where they really felt big, where they really felt as if, nothing could touch them, where they were really proud of themselves. And they went home that day or that week or that month, and they just felt larger than life. The same side, when were there moments in their life, in their career, where they felt really small, where they wanted to escape, where they wanted to get away, and didn't want to go back to work the next day. And for some reason, the words big and small, in my experience, really seem to resonate with people and allows them to dig in a little bit. But even in this space, don't stop with a simple answer, right? I liked my boss. Great. Why did you like your boss? Dig into it. What did they do? What did they not do? How did they support you? How did they not support you? Find out the why, right? These are the things, the why are the things that will really lead to those revelatory moments. So move beyond just the sort of the circumstance and the environment, and really get the person to think about, what was it about the environment? What were the details and the specifics that led to this feeling of being big or the feeling of being small? Okay, so that's it for reflecting on the past. Career transition and motivation, right? So I really want to talk about, and going back to, let's not overlook the role of motivation and the role it's played in previous decisions and the role that it will continue playing in your life. So when I say motivation, what am I talking about? Motivational characteristics. Well, these are really the internal drivers, really, that that influence and shape what a person will find, attractive, fulfilling, and energizing, versus the opposite of that, right? Versus really unattractive, really unfulfilling, and energy depleting, or I have a really finite amount of energy for this type of circumstance, situation, or environment. And so, just a little bit of detail about motivation. First things first, it originates in our early years and it evolves over time, right? So it starts very early. It's not set in stone. As we move through our life and we move through our experiences and transitionary experiences, our motivation can change, but it is something that usually evolves rather slowly, and started within you a long, long time ago. It's also unique to the individual, right? My motivation is unique to me. Your motivation is unique to you. And that's really important to recognize. It's also important to recognize that motivation isn't observable, right? This is under the hood stuff that I'm talking about. I'll come back to that toward the tail end of what I'm talking about here today. But it's under the hood stuff, which is really, really important. It's not about skill or ability, right? Motivation is not about what you're good at. It's not about what you're bad at. It's not about what you can do or what you can't do. It's not about what you or what what you feel like you can be successful at. Motivation is, and therefore motivation is not good or bad. Your motivational makeup is not good or bad. It just is what it is, and it's important to not put skill or ability on it, and to just evaluate what your motivation means for you versus anything else. And then finally, let's recognize that motivation has a really strong influence on not only your behavior, but your decision making, right? So that's really, really important to recognize. Okay, so to discuss the role of motivation within a person's career and career transition, I'm going to be pulling in some elements of our new IDI report, which is the Motivation and Career Report. Very briefly here, this report is a new way of showcasing an individual's IDI profile. For those of you who understand or who know the IDI very well, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say IDI. For those of you who are not on the call or who are not certified or know what I say when I bring up IDI, the Individual Directions Inventory is our motivational assessment here at MRG. And so the motivation and career report takes somebody's IDI profile and it puts it within the context of their career, right? If you're curious about this report, David, myself, and also our president, Tricia Nadif, we created a little video series describing the elements of this report, which are available now, which you can check out. And we'll be sure to include the links to all that stuff in our follow-up to this webinar so you can access those. Okay, so again, motivation and a person's career and career transition. It's important, I would say, to recognize that an individual's motivational profile allows for a couple of things, right? It allows for understanding potentially what their expectations might be about a job or a profession or an organization. It also allows for some understanding about what the ideal might look like, right? Within that organization or within that role. What should a person be looking for, right? What won't work well? We really can use an individual's motivation to start to determine some alignment. So let's use a couple of the dimensions on the IDI to start to give an example of this, put this in a little bit of context. So let's assume for this example that we have an individual who has a high gaining stature score. So gaining stature is a dimension on the IDI that really talks about being motivated by really experiencing recognition and respect, right? A person is motivated to go out there, to be well known by others, to potentially be esteemed by others, to have a degree of social skill. And again, will be really attracted to environments that allows them to demonstrate that social skill and potential recognition. So here we have a person potentially with a high gaining stature score. What does that mean? Well, in this circumstance, person really might prefer environments that allow them to showcase their skills and be noticed, be respected, and potentially gain recognition for what they bring to the table, right? They might not be outwardly aggressive about, showing or wanting this type of attention, but they will greatly appreciate knowing that others respect them, that others are acknowledging their contributions, and that, again, what they're bringing to the table is valued, that it's bringing value to other people, or that it is valued by others. At the same time, they're likely to be sensitive to environments where their efforts are not recognized, right? Or where they feel like their efforts are not being respected or valued in terms of what they are contributing. They also might be sensitive to environments where constructive criticism is rather constant, right? They're likely to be sensitive to feedback because a person who's high in gaining stature is working so hard to ensure that you're thinking positively about what they're doing. When they get feedback that it's not going well, that can hurt a little bit, right? Let's take a low score, right? So how about structuring? Structuring is another dimension on the IDI. Structuring talks about being motivated and energized by being really efficient, being really organized in the details. I love the details. Talk to me about the details is what a person will say with a higher structuring score. This is an example, though. Let's say a person has a low structuring score, right? So they're not as motivated by what is on screen here, but by being efficient and organized. So what's going to happen here? Well, they're really going to prefer environments that are not stymied by, process or policies or procedures, right? They're not likely to get, energized by the details, and much more likely to prefer action, getting the ball rolling and figuring out, what they're doing. So environments and jobs that are really concerned with the how, won't be loved by this individual. They're likely to prefer, environments that might be a little bit more free form, and where they can be a little bit potentially more high level with their thinking and with their work, right? So again, these are things that we can start to put together to determine what a person's expectations might be about a job, and then also what the ideal might look like. Next thing I want to talk about just in terms of motivation is the fact that our motivations are always interacting with one another. These things don't happen in isolation. So it's really important to bear a couple of things in mind. Motivation can reinforce or conflict with itself, right? So, we can have strong feelings or drivers that build upon one another to create a very strong attraction towards something, or a strong unattraction towards something. We also can have mixed feelings, right? Or have drivers that really interfere with each other. You have a motivation that pulls you this way, but you get another motivation that pushes you that way. So what does this look like in terms of a career transition? So I think, again, in terms of developmental space, This is an opportunity to reflect and think about the fact that potentially over time, you've had the person potentially has had mixed messages internally, right? And this is an opportunity to think directionally about how these drivers have influenced the person over the span to date. And how potentially can I gain a little bit of awareness right now to make a decision that might be more of a breakthrough for me here. Really an opportunity to understand what is going on the inside. So how can we use these motivational interactions to understand that a little bit more? Well, let's take another example here, right? So in this example, you've got an individual who has a higher enduring score and a lower controlling score. So you've got a person who's more concerned with demonstrating willpower and persistence, which is what that enduring dimension is all about, demonstrating and being energized by showing willpower and persistence. And then this person here, there would be, again, more concerned with demonstrating willpower and persistence than being in positions of influence or authority, right? So that lower score on controlling. Controlling is all about, demonstrating influence or authority. And so a person who is lower on this dimension is not going to be as motivated to be in situations where they feel like they have influence or authority. It's not necessarily as important to them. So, so this is a person that would really prefer working diligently on their own versus leading people, right? So this person is really likely motivated by challenging situations, or situations that really test their own endurance and stamina. They'll really be energized by pushing themselves and sticking to something to accomplish something. At the same time, they aren't in it. They aren't there to influence others or have authority over them or have authority over the situation. Instead, they're much more likely to enjoy focusing on their own stuff to a degree, right? So if this person is in a leadership role and it takes them away from, working hard to finish something on their own, demonstrating their own stamina to finish something or attack a challenging situation, that's likely to be a really frustrating situation or environment for them. So in this circumstance, you're really going to evaluate, is the leadership role right for this person? If they have been in leadership, are they willing to put up with the trade-off? Are they willing to understand what the pros and cons are about potentially the leadership role? And again, really evaluating their motivation for this versus that, and understanding how it might create some mixed messages internally, which is okay, but are having some understanding about that and being clear-eyed about the fact that there might be some challenging moments if they are in a particular environments. Okay. Last things last year is I just want to talk about bias, right? And it's important to recognize that we all have biases, and our motivation is likely a factor for many of them, right? So it's important for people to evaluate, what their assumptions are and really how it has impacted their career decision making. When I say the name Adam Grant, I'm sure many of you know who I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, Adam Grant's an organizational psychologist. And I came across an article of his relatively recently that talked about the I'm not biased bias, right? And it's this recognition that many people today recognize that bias is a thing, but they think that because they recognize bias is a thing that I'm not biased. Well, no, that's not really right, right? It really is, when he's talking about the I'm not biased bias, it's people not really questioning their assumptions enough, questioning what they know, questioning what they feel like they've always known. And so that's important to think about. And so in this circumstance, again, for those of you who are familiar with the IDI, you'll recognize attracting and maintaining as clusters within the IDI. For those of you who are not familiar, we group the IDI dimensions into particular themes. Attracting and maintaining would be two of those themes. So in this circumstance, we would have a person who would have lower scores on the dimensions within the attracting theme or cluster, and we would have a person who has higher scores within the maintaining theme or cluster. So I think really what is important to recognize here, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, is the fact that our motivations, especially when we have very high or very low scores, can lead to potential biases, and the fact that we potentially normalize this over time, right? Because we can't observe this and stuff, we've normalized our own motivations, and that moves us to the point of, doesn't everybody think like this? How could you approach it any differently? Or how could you feel any differently? Of course, that's normal. Well, I'm here to tell you that if you have very high or very low scores, it might not be normal, right? Your motivation might not be normal and lead to some of the biases that are on screen here, So a person with lower attracting scores, they might assume that other people don't need positive recognition or validation because they don't need it. Or in terms of maintaining on the high side, they might assume that people value predictability because they need it, right? So it's really important to, again, evaluate your own biases in terms of how you feel, how you potentially have made decisions in the past, what is important to be thinking about in terms of the decisions in the future. And so you go back to that developmental focus, ensuring that you understand how your motivation might really be influencing decision-making one way or the other is important. All right, so that's it for me today. Any questions or comments while I hand this over to David?
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, we have had a few great questions coming in. One that I just want to answer very quickly for folks who are IDI certified. We've had a couple of folks ask if you have somebody who you want this report for, if they need to take that assessment over again. They do not. You can reorder a report. You can reorder the motivation and career report using existing IDI data. And contact client services if you have any questions or look in the knowledge base about how to reorder a report. So just wanted to get that out there. And then a couple interesting coaching scenarios came up for you guys to weigh in on. One is, do you have any tips for helping an employee transition down in a position? For example, maybe if they're pre-retirement but not quite ready for retirement and they're moving into a role with that's less demanding. What's your advice for that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say unique in some ways, and it's not that distinct from going the other direction, right? Or that unique. It's really thinking about. I would say two things from in my mind. Thinking about what the role is right now and what it is doing for the person in terms of their own motivation, in terms of how they feel about it. And then before they move into the role that they will be going down to, really thinking about, again, what it is that they might be losing. And will they be okay with that? Being really clear-eyed about the fact that this new role is not going to provide them potentially, X, Y, and Z that the role that they're currently in has. At the same time, what will the new role allow for them, to take advantage of? Maybe it gives them more freedom, more independence to do some things on their own or focus on hobbies or something along those lines. And again, to think about what are the key fundamental differences between the roles and how will that play out for them potentially in terms of how they feel and what it does for them.
Thanks. One more scenario about what you can do if someone feels that there's really nothing new to learn in their current job after just 2 years or so of occupying the position, and they feel like there's kind of nothing new for them.
Really good question. So I think I think the thing to think about here is that really the truth? And think about, again, their own biases, their own motivation, and how is that playing a role in terms of how they're thinking and feeling about where they are, and is that actually the truth? And really evaluate the situation with all of it, the 360 degree of that situation. I would find it unlikely that there would be nothing else for a person to learn, whether or not they've been enrolled for 8 months or 28 years. And I think that potentially is more about a mindset than it potentially is about the environment of the role itself. Just thinking about, Carol Dweck's work in terms of a growth versus a fixed mindset. And if they really, really feel that way, then hey, maybe it is time for a transition to a different position or a different job. So capitalizing on what exactly it is we're talking about here today.
All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on, but we have terrific questions coming in. Please do keep them coming. We'll answer as many as we can during the broadcast, and then we'll also, of course, get to them offline and put them in our Q&A as well. So I will let us move on, but keep those questions coming.
Thank you, Lucy. It's great to be here. I saw the list of attendees today. It's a very long list. A lot of people I've known for many, many years. Many people are new. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and we're very grateful for your participation. Picking up from where Drew left over, the developmental focus on this can actually be a substantial part. Yes, the focus is on managing a career transition, but there is an opportunity, as Drew points out. This is a chance to rebrand. This is a chance to make a decision about the trajectory. This is also a chance for any person to evaluate their ability to change environment successfully. And in doing that, a chance to reflect on the way that I'm showing up, what's authentic to me, what direction do I really want to take? And the IDI can add a great deal of value in that, but history also teaches us a certain number of things as well. These are important moments in time. We do not change role either internally or externally without some fair degree of consideration, and typically there is an element of risk involved. And this can apply, of course, to internal career transition as well as external moves. So as we begin to think about this, what are the issues that typically people are struggling with or challenging, feeling challenged by as they negotiate this particular dynamic in their trajectory? There are a few things. I know many people who want out, but wanting out doesn't necessarily mean that you know what you ultimately do want. I just want to get out of here. That's a negative motivation. It's a good reason for you to leave your job. It's not a good reason for someone else to hire you. That's a thing. People may feel to some extent the victim of their environment. The beggars can't be choosers mentality, which puts us into almost a supplicant type of mindset. Does that necessarily serve us well? If I'm not clear what I'm after, if I haven't grounded that, if I don't have that clarity of thought and conviction, I may just take whatever is going. And that is okay transactionally, but from a trajectory or a directional point of view, is that necessarily the best way to approach this and even to think about it? There's a language associated with careers. There certainly is a language dynamic when it comes to interviewing, when people are asking you to describe yourself, either more broadly or relative to specific aspects of the role or the environment or otherwise. And if we cannot easily access that, because as you know, particularly in job interviews, it is in the moment. You have to deliver right there, right then. And having access to language which is accurate and specific and objective and critically authentic to that individual really can make a difference. If you're using canned language, if it comes across as scripted, or if you don't know what you're talking about and you're just making it up in the moment, they will see through you. You know that. And there is a psychological disadvantage in interviews. I think particularly panel interviews, if you've ever been in front of a firing squad, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's not easy. They have all the power. They have something you want. You have the obligation to sit there and answer all their questions. And it's not easy to get away from that need to say the right things, prove the right characteristics, and so on. But where are you in all of this? So walking in the room with that greater sense of self, with that greater sense of I'm clear what I'm looking for, really can make a difference. So we've tried in the career version of the report to try to crystallize this at some level. The analogy I'll use here is actually psychotherapy. In classic psychotherapy, when people say, I'm unhappy, I'm dissatisfied, I'm frustrated, that doesn't mean an awful lot. And it doesn't mean an awful lot because it could mean anything. It's too vague. It's analogous to our career. When we talk about what am I really looking for in my career, what matters to me, if we can't be specific, if we can't crystallize that at some level, and know to a reasonable degree of certainty and conviction and specificity what that might look like, then we're going to stay at the concept of the vague, and that's not adequate. I want to put one thought in your mind before I go into any more granular detail. We're talking here about motivational characteristics. As Drew described, this is about what you find personally fulfilling, energizing, rewarding, satisfying. The likelihood you're going to get everything you want and avoid everything you don't, I've never seen it. If anyone finds it, I'll send you my email address. You will have a friend for life. So we have to be realistic about this. This is about defining the things that really matter the most. It's about helping to clarify the things that are perhaps I'm a bit more flexible, or I'm more willing to negotiate, or is that as a compromise I can live with in the interests of being realistic in the job search. But we have looked at three dynamics, and the IDI motivational characteristics are embedded in this. The three overarching aspects that we look at, the first is the type of environment more broadly. The IDI can tell us a little bit more about the types of cultures, the types of environments, the types of landscapes that probably would be a reasonably good fit for any individual. And I'm going to qualify this in a moment. This is just the high-level description. Similarly for the role, now we're being specific. What is it about the type of role? What characteristics should I look for? And then, of course, relationships. Relationships being absolutely inescapable, and it matters. There are certain types of people that you will naturally be drawn towards, or you have expectations of relationships. What are they? Not just, I want to get on with people. I want to work with people I like working with. That again is too vague. Let's crystallize that a little bit. In pursuit of doing so, it's important also that we deal with the things that are less likely to work. And it may feel like a statement of the obvious, or simply the antithesis of what I've said before. Sure, it makes sense. The type of cultures where I'm probably not that going to work. The type of role, there are characteristics in here, it's just not me. That's fair. But there are two dynamics I would invite you to reflect upon. That there may be some of these that really do work and others that don't. I coached someone recently where this person was high on the creating driver in IDI. They enjoyed discovery, they were exploratory thinkers, and so on. The role fit very well, but the broader environment was very conservative. There were aspects actually of the traditionalist mindset. We've always done it this way. What are we talking about it for? So this person ultimately, because it was so important to them, felt that they would have ultimately been swimming upstream every day. So even though the role was attractive, the broader environment just didn't support the degree to which this was important to them. And it is a question of degree. And that was a good decision on that person. This is probably not the right fit for me. It takes a lot to have that type of courage, I gotta tell you. And that courage needs a basis. The second thing I mentioned around this as an important criteria is that when we are in an environment or a role or with people and it's working well, we're enjoying it, that doesn't create a great deal of what we call psychological salience. The things that irritate us or annoy us or ruin our day have a disproportionate effect. This is what's known in psychological terms as the von Restorff effect. So as we make career decisions, we may take for granted and forget very quickly all the stuff that's working. It goes off our radar very quickly because it's not causing this level of activity in our brain and in our emotions. It's that one or two things that really irritate us that may cause that hypersensitivity or that heightened level of awareness. And is that biasing the kind of career decisions we're making? Or do we only realize all the good stuff we have when we move environment and realize it's no longer there. This is a risk of the von Restorff effect. This matters. So it's not just a statement of the obvious. This can have significant value in the conversation, in a coaching context, in the thinking, in the reflective space for the people that you are supporting. Very briefly, this is what the report looks like, and it draws upon the two aspects that Drew has illuminated. Number one, past experience. Past experience matters. This is the journey you have had. It is unique to the individual, and it's partly not just about the organizational culture, it's about the way that that person has experienced the culture. So there's a few coaching questions in there, which really goes down to two areas: the aspects of the culture. What was it about that that you really enjoyed? It's not arbitrary. We have all worked in environments and there was aspects of it that I really, really enjoyed. It worked for me. I just fit in naturally. The chemistry was there. It was effortless. Isn't it a thing of beauty? And there are other aspects or other cultures where, you know what, I love the role, I love the people, but the broader landscape, it just wasn't me. I couldn't fit in. Was it something about their values? Was it something about the way that they thought? There was some dynamic happening. Inviting people to reflect on that can really be helpful. The thing about this, and it will be the same for the role and the relationships I'm about to get to, is that as we reflect upon the past, we are getting to things which are innately subjective, and that's fine. That is by design. We are looking for that subjectivity. We want people to think about how they experience their world. The limiting factor potentially is that if that is the only thing that they are accessing as they drive their career decisions, there are some limitations around that. And the limitations are things that the IDI itself, which when we look at the culture aspect of the report, there is the past experience and there's the psychometric measurement. The IDI will tell you, based on the unique motivational characteristics of that individual, what types of cultures, what characteristics specifically in that culture would make it more likely that you would fit in, or that it would be less energy draining for you, it would be more authentic to you, and it would be more sustainable over time. Similarly, the things that are less relevant to you. So if these were big pieces in the culture and you had to line up with them, but you're not getting anything out of it, that's another factor to consider, bearing in mind everything we've talked about up to this point. So where the past is innately subjective, and rightly so, the IDI adds a few dynamics which are worth reflecting on. Number one, it brings not subjectivity, it brings objectivity. These IDI scores are measured in the report in very specific percentile terms. It describes where you are motivationally relative to others, which is by definition objective. It's very hard for any of us to have any sense of how we compare to other people when the only thing we can observe about other people are their behaviors. So it really gives us a sense not only of what you are more drawn to or less drawn to, it gives you a sense of just how much, the magnitude, the order, the degree. Otherwise, we think in more categorical terms, you are or you are not, and that's typically not accurate of people. So it brings an objectivity, it brings a comparability. It gives me a good sense of where I am relative to most other people. Again, think about how that gives you a chance to describe yourself more accurately. And the quantification of this, even though, I mean, we're not driven by percentile or integer values in this report really, it will give you a sense of order or priority. When I'm looking for an organizational culture, what's the rank order of things? What are the things that are probably really important, that I'm less willing to negotiate, that really matter to me? Or that if these are factors which are in the culture and it really doesn't line up with what I'm about as a person, my values, my beliefs, the way I like to work, the way I think, whatever it may be. That's a reasonable pause for thought. It's completely legitimate. Similarly, when it comes to the role, we draw upon aspects of experience. There are aspects of role that we really have enjoyed, things that we have done that we got a great deal out of, and things that we have done that just never worked for us. Things that we are intellectually capable of, but it has never paid us back emotionally or in terms of satisfaction. You can do it all day. You can be really good at it. It's never going to reward you. What are they? Crystallizing that, reflecting upon that, that is a level of thinking that only that person can do. That is their role, that is their responsibility, and that is their contribution in the coaching process. Similarly, when it comes to specific aspects of role, IDI can tell us that there are aspects of role that you probably should be looking out for, and aspects of role that are probably, it's not that big a criteria. If it's there, okay. If it's not there, but just make sure you're not signing up to do something that is really not going to pay you back. You can do it. The question is, can you sustain it? Because you're going to have to find energy every single day to go and do things that are less rewarding for you. What proportion of your day would that entail? And the final thing then is around relationships, and a similar approach here. So I'm going to scoot to this one relatively quickly. The past, there were aspects of relationships that worked and didn't work. What was it? It's not random. There are reasons for it. Inviting the person to reflect on that can add a great deal of value, because this is the conversation they've never had with themselves. Similarly, IDI can add the objectivity to all of that. It can add the specificity. It can add the comparability. It can provide measures of degree in all of this. Just how important are these types of relational dynamics? And what are the things that you are less drawn towards, would find less energizing? If it's not there, it's not that big a deal. If it's a big piece of the relationship dynamic, you're going to have to find energy for it, whether you like it or not, because you won't like it. Is that worth doing? It gives you a chance to assess. Ultimately, what we're aiming for here is to get to 4 key types of benefits as someone uses this version of the IDI report and all of the exercises and insights that come with it. The 4 are this. I want to know what for me uniquely constitutes a quality opportunity. I want to have some objective criteria against which to measure and assess the quality of future opportunities, be they internal or external, or what directions I'm going to take. Am I really going to drive down that whole leadership thing, the empire building, or do I really want to focus on individual contributor, maybe a subject matter expert, technical role? There's lots of different things that this can help me to evaluate and organize my thinking around. The language thing. This provides a language which makes it much easier for the person to describe themselves, because they're accessing the more reflective space, which is the past experience. They're bringing the stories to front of mind. They can draw upon that in the interview or as they look at opportunities. And the IDI, again, very specific, very crystallized, very tangible. So being able to articulate what you're about, why you do what you do, can add a significant degree of value. The confidence factor is a big one. It's a tough world out there. It's not always easy to defend our choices. I want a job. I've seen people, it's the worst thing I've ever seen, people getting rejected for jobs they never actually really wanted to begin with, but they applied because they felt they should. And they fell into that supplicant role when they got there. And it's very tempting. The interview process is very seductive in that sense. I've seen other people say, you know what, this is not the right fit for me, and have the courage of their conviction to be able to do so. It's not arrogance. It's not being picky. We all are realistic about, a willingness to compromise. The ideal fit I mentioned earlier, everything you want and avoiding everything you don't, is not realistic. But there is a tipping point where it's certainly helpful to know where we stand and what matters to us. And then, in the interview process, we have an opportunity to ask questions. We have an opportunity to qualify things that they're saying. Or if I'm talking to someone who has worked in a given organization or industry before, I'm clear what I should be looking for. I know what questions to ask them. I know what the warning signs are. I know the amber flags and the green flags and the red flags now. So I can be much more succinct and specific in qualifying and clarifying. That adds a great deal of value. All of this comes together with a combination of the report and, of course, a skilled professional in facilitating that conversation. I'm going to hand it back to Lucy to facilitate any questions. Lucy.
Thanks so much, David. And thanks everyone for your great questions. One logistical one that I wanted to answer, since a few people have come into the Q&A with it, is how would you or can you take this or get your own report in order to understand it better? You actually can. Everybody who's attending today, you'll have an invitation to take that yourself, or if you've already taken the IDI, you can just get this report with your data. So please just keep an eye on your emails later today and tomorrow, and we'll have the instructions for how to do that. So that's a logistical one. And again, keep them coming. We have a lot we won't get to today. I will throw one to David now, but do keep popping them in the Q&A and we'll get to them later. One question that came in, David, was how can you use some of this info to work on work-life balance? How does the motivational information fit into that?
Yeah, that's a very reasonable question, I have to say. There's lots of answers to that, and I'm not sure I'm going to do complete justice to it, but my overarching response is this, IDI is not an occupational assessment. IDI is measuring you, what motivates you today, not 20 years ago, by the way. And to the question, it helps us to assess what am I asking from my work environment? What reasonable expectations can I have from my work and my professional life? And what other aspects of what I really find rewarding work is never going to give you. And that helps people to differentiate between, as I walk in the door in my office, or in these cases, as I open the Zoom call with my colleagues, or go into the study that I have in the back of the house, what are my realistic expectations in terms of personal fulfillment and satisfaction from this role of mine and the people I work with and the environment within which I work? And what are the things it's never going to give me, or I would be better served seeking it elsewhere, so that the person carves up their world in a way that allows maximum fulfillment and gets away from the analogy of work-life balance, which is typically the seesaw analogy. As one goes up, the other goes down. That doesn't necessarily apply. I will put a bit more flesh on the bone in the responses we give after the webinar, but I hope that's adequate for the moment.
Thanks, David. Absolutely. Yes, so don't hesitate to keep throwing those questions in as we close up, but I will let everyone get on with the next hour of their day. So just as we finish up, what's coming up with MRG, we will be doing an encore presentation of one of our very popular webinars on motivation and self-regulation in the month of March. Registration is open for that now. We have a whole bunch of workshops coming up. Our workshops are for MRG clients, and they do a deeper dive, smaller group, very interactive, online, of course. And our next one is coming up in just a few weeks, which is actually on this report here. We may be on wait list for that, but go ahead and sign up, because we do try to meet demand as much as possible to add additional dates. So that'll be a deeper dive into this particular report, but we have a lot more coming soon. So just keep an eye on your email and make sure you're subscribed to our webinars and workshops for that. Certifications we have coming up, the LEA 360, which is our leadership tool, starts April 13th. And the next certification for IDI starts May 13th. But as always, do get in touch with us. Client services at mrg.com is a great way to reach us. If you need something sooner than that, we are well known for bending over pretty far backwards to try to accommodate folks. So if you're interested in certifications and in tools and anything, just at least get in touch with us. We're always happy to have the conversation. So with that, I will leave you all to the rest of your day. Thank you so very much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again soon, and look for those invitations to take the assessment and get your report in your inbox later on. Thanks so much, everyone.